All right, so it is day 114 of going through my old journal, and the quote for today says, "Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself." And then it says, "What changes have you thought about making in yourself and why?" So if you're following along, just pause the video and think about what you have to say about this, and I will read you my response. Okay, let's see what I said. I said, "I've actively been working on making a lot of changes to myself lately." And I had definitely, like, the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, I don't know, the past recent years, I've definitely been changing. I'm a totally different person than I was, a few years ago. And I said it's been over the past several years, but really in the last 2, and especially over the last few months. So I said, well, I wouldn't say that I've been working harder to change over the past few months, but more like something is finally clicking and I'm actually seeing results. I want to be more responsible and reliable, and I've talked about this a lot. I'm tired of always being stressed and not feeling like I'm good enough. A part of me thinks that maybe this world / society, and then I put in parentheses, in the US, is just living wrong, and that's why I've struggled so hard to conform, because I'm trying to conform to a broken system." And I said, "But a part of me is just tired of fighting. Even though I've always sort of felt destined to do something substantial with my life, at this point, I just want to exist without stress, anxiety, fear, pain, etc. I love to also find happiness and fulfillment, but as years go by, I'm less and less sure that I'll ever find that." So that's a little bit, I don't know, it's weird because it's like optimistic and pessimistic at the same time. But it kind of reminds me, that last part kind of reminds me of this TikTok that I saw today, where this guy was just kind of like, he's like, I don't know, I don't do all of these things that everybody, I don't wake up early, I nap sometimes, I don't always eat healthy, I rarely eat healthy, I don't think I'm going to do anything big with my life, and that's okay. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are coming to, and I saw this other TikTok where this guy was talking about like Gen Z and how people like boomers and Gen X and some millennials are kind of confused about Gen Z. Like, they don't understand Gen Z because, and he said, a lot of them either seem like they're just kind of nihilistic, like they're just kind of given up and checked out, or on the flip side, there's some that are just like kind of going wild, just kind of like just doing wild stuff and ready to change and ready to do all this stuff. And he had a point to say that, like, especially for millennials, which is what I fall in, we kind of saw the back end of when capitalism was really kind of working. Prior to the 80s, you could, even without going to college, really, like, you could get a decent job, raise a family. We had a strong middle class and everything. And then there was a lot of political things that happened in the 80s, a lot of like deregulation and a lot of changes that continued on in the 90s. It's not just one party, it's both parties, Reagan and Clinton, and they've all kind of done some things to kind of dismantle some of the things that kept capitalism in check. And he made this analogy that, like, he's like, it's kind of like somebody kind of loosened in the 80s, they kind of loosened the lug nuts on the tires of the car, that most people had. And then the car was still able to run for a while, but eventually the wheels have just fallen off. And he's like, over the past decade or two, the wheels have fallen off. And he's like, with millennials, we saw a time where the wheels were still on the car, things were still running. That's why most of us went to college, because, we thought, you go to college and you can get a job, but there's just no job stability. Like, it's just not the same as like our parents had it. And you know, a lot of boomers are just so confused as to why millennials and Gen Z are acting the way we are. But it's like, most of them, I don't think, realize how different things are for our generations. And, you know, the guy made the point, he's like, you know, I went to college and, you know, he said when he was early in college, the Iraq War happened, and then, or 9/11 happened, and, you know, the war after that, and then, when he was ready to buy a house, the housing market collapsed. And he's like, Gen Z has never known a time that things were like normal, you know, like they've always had these turbulent things happen throughout their whole lives. You know, they had the first, you know, kind of recession, and then, you know, just all sorts of things. And then you have COVID and all this stuff. And, you know, they just don't have this hope for the future that they're going to be able to raise a family and live well. And so they don't have that. They've never known that, like millennials kind of had at the early point of their lives. And so yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Which one was this? Oh, so yeah, like I think for a lot of the previous generations, there was this like optimistic view that, you know, you could do these things and end up, you know, living the American dream and having a good life. And I think for a lot of us, like, we just don't want to be struggling. We just don't want to be fighting. And that's just kind of where we're at. We'll be content, like, just kind of getting by and surviving. And that's kind of, I guess, where I've fallen to. Like, I don't feel like, you know, because I've struggled too to figure out, like, what's the purpose in life? Like, what's my purpose? What am I going to do? What career am I going to have that's going to have some sort of an impact on anything? And, you know, I'm starting to just kind of give that up and just being like, I'm just going to try to live as best I can. And, yeah. But yeah, so the quote, everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. I think there's been a lot, especially of millennials, of like looking inward and just seeing how to change themselves to kind of live their best life. And people may think that that's a little bit self-centered, but I think to be able to help other people, like, you've got to get kind of yourself balanced first. And so that's kind of where I'm at. Like, this time last year, I was just thinking, I've been thinking about this the last few days. Like, this time last year was probably one of the worst times in my life. I was so stressed about school and work. I was failing a class. Because it was Thanksgiving that I first saw, like, I was having so much anxiety. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist who ended up not being a very good one. But I was to that point that I felt like I needed some help. And he turned out to not be very helpful, but I, you know, just was like, I can't keep living like this. I have to make some changes. And thankfully, like, all of these things I've been working on over the past few years have finally started coming together. And this year I'm in such a better place, and I am more hopeful than I was here, I think, for the future. Still not sure exactly what's gonna happen, but I am more hopeful, I guess. But in a weird, I don't know, kind of going back to what I said yesterday about being happy, you know, kind of not happy that I don't have kids, but yeah, I said I'm glad that I don't have children who will suffer. I'm also glad that I don't, I don't know if I want to say this. This may come off wrong, but like, I feel like not having kids makes me less worried about the future for myself too, because I feel like, it's gonna sound bad, but me and my roommate have talked about this, and I've seen posts about it on like social media, and especially like Gen Z, like, we're not afraid of death. Like, we don't welcome it, and we're not like suicidal or anything, but at the same time, like, me and my roommate are just kind of like, if it happens, it happens. Or if things get bad enough, then we don't want to suffer. We'll just take care of it, to where we don't have to suffer. And I feel like if I had kids, then I would be like, feel more like I would need to survive to help my kids. But I don't know. And there's this big talk right now about, like, there's so many, like, women in their 30s that don't have any kids, and especially with the last election, there's been a lot of talk about, these unmarried women, that they kind of, like, made the election go a different direction than most people thought was going to happen. And I think part of it is that too. Like, I think there's people that are looking at the world right now, and number one, either they realize that they can't raise a kid properly, they don't have enough money or ways to raise a kid that would be good, that would provide the kid a good life. And then also just kind of like, we're all stressed out and struggling already. So having that added stress just seems like too much. And, they're talking about, some people are talking about, well, we need to make these women get married. Like, people are saying that on the news, conservative news, but like, no, like, if you want people to have more kids, you need to make their lives a life where they could see being able to effectively raise a kid. And some countries do that, but in the US it's not. Like, there's all this talk about, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little controversial, but like, there's the talk about, abortion and, but there's no talk about like what happens. There's not as much talk about like what happens after the kids are born. I think more women would be willing to have kids if there was more support for, helping them to raise the kids afterwards, or the ability for them and the families to make enough money to be able to, effectively raise kids. So anyway, right now, I'm not, I don't have to worry about that. I don't plan on, at this point, I don't plan on ever having kids. So, but I hope, that if younger generations do want that things will change to the point to where if that's what they want, then they will have the ability to do that. But for right now, I think there is a lot of millennials that are just focusing on themselves, because what else can you do? It's hard to focus on other people when a lot of millennials and are struggling themselves. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that. So I will be back tomorrow with day 115.